Hi, I'm Greg Hulks, and this song is a Robin Rendell classic. That Night in a Madrid Hotel. I wonder who's got the key to 529 this evening. Robin, the gentleman that he is, I'm sure returned it to reception. I'm sure he had a great time. Brings back memories for you, Robin, I'm sure. Here we go with my cover. When my friend introduced me, I hoped she'd seduce me that night in a Madrid hotel. She looked at me cutely, hoped it were loosely, if it were both time would tell. What could have been safer than a blunt safety razor on a face that was covered in fluff? But 10 minutes later, uncovered in paper, my face said enough is enough. It was torn, it was tattered, like a fish that had been battered and dropped in the hot fat to fry. Just when it mattered, my confidence shattered as I waited for the blood to run dry. My friend said he'd lend me one of his many cravats with a paisley design. He said I were trendy, ready to send me upstairs to 529. I stared at the number all over and under and knocked as quietly as I could. But it echoed like thunder as I started to wonder if this was the time to touch wood. When my friend introduced me, I hoped she seduced me that night in a Madrid hotel. She looked at me cutely, I hoped it were loosely, if it were both time would tell. We kissed and we fumbled, I started to mumble as my words were trapped on my tongue. Deep in the jungle, Vesuvius rumbled, and the spring in my step came unsprung. Rules had been broken, but the hokery pokem was lost in a teenage desire. What was awoken is best left unspoken, but there's never no smoke without fire. It was musical bedrooms, Old Spice and perfumes, and smuggled in bottles of wine. Each key with a new tune, once in a blue moon when the boys and the girls crossed the line. The teachers weren't too thrilled, I remember their looks killed without any trial or appeal. There was no peace or goodwill, all Jack and no Jill. Well, that's what they thought was the deal. When my friends introduced me, I hoped she'd seduce me that night in a Madrid hotel. She looked at me cutely, I hope it were loosely, if it were both time would tell. When my friends introduced me, hoped she'd seduce me that night in a Madrid hotel. She looked at me cutely, hoped it were loosely, if it were both time would tell. She looked at me cutely, hoped it were loosely, if it were both time would tell. Thank you, Robin.